"Sir, please don't start that car." The voice came from below the driver's side window, so small it nearly vanished under the sound of Ottawa traffic and the snap of wind pulling at the Canadian flags along Wellington Street. Edmund Prescott had already placed his briefcase on the passenger seat. His right hand was on the ignition key. His left was reaching for the seatbelt. He had been 30 seconds from pulling out of the underground parking garage beneath the Elgin Street courthouse and driving home to the house on Rockcliffe where a glass of Lagavulin and an empty kitchen were waiting for him, the way they had waited every evening for the past 11 months since his wife died. And now a child was standing beside his car, and now a child was standing by his car with one hand pressed flat against the window glass, 5 small fingers splayed wide, as if the hand alone could hold the vehicle in place. Edmund turned his head. The boy could not have been older than 6. His skin was a deep brown that caught the fluorescent light of the parking garage in a way that made his face look almost carved. His hair was black and thick, cut roughly, unevenly, as though someone had done it at home with kitchen scissors and a steady hand but no mirror. He wore a blue puffer jacket that had lost most of its puff, zipped to the chin, and track pants with a tear along the left knee that had been mended with a strip of silver duct tape. His boots were rubber, the kind you buy at a dollar store for spring puddles. They were too large for him. He had stuffed something, newspaper perhaps, into the toes to make them fit. But his eyes were what stopped Edmund from turning the key. They were dark and wide and completely, utterly serious. There was nothing playful in them, nothing confused. The boy was looking at Edmund the way a person looks at another person when they have something urgent to say and are not sure they will be believed. Edmund lowered the window halfway. "Son," he said, "you shouldn't be down here. This garage is not safe for children." "It's not safe for you," the boy said. "There's something wrong with your car. A man was under it." I watched him. Edmund's hand moved away from the ignition without his thinking about it. It settled on his thigh. He could feel his own pulse there, in the soft pad of his thumb, which was odd because he had not been aware of his heart doing anything unusual until that moment. "When," he said, "when did you see this?" "Last night, late, after the man at the gate went to sleep in his chair. I come in through the east stairwell because the door doesn't lock right. I sleep behind the vents on level 2 because it's warm there. The air comes out warm." The boy said this without shame, the way a child states a fact about the geography of his own life. "I heard someone. I didn't come out. My grandmother told me never to come out when there are men in the garage at night. But I looked. He was under your car. This one, the blue one with the letters on the back." Edmund drove a dark blue Volvo S90 with a custom plate that read EDPR lead out. He had been parking in the same reserved spot on level 1 for 23 years, first as a senior partner at Prescott Fanning LLP, and now in retirement as a courtesy extended by the courthouse for his decades of service as amicus curiae. Everyone who worked in this building knew which car was his. He looked at the boy for a long moment. The boy did not look away. "What's your name?" Edmund said. "Josiah. Josiah. I'm going to step out of this car now. I want you to step back and give me room." "Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." Edmund opened the door slowly. He set both feet on the concrete floor of the garage and stood. His knees protested the way they always did, the right one more than the left, a reminder from a skiing accident in Tremblant 30 years ago that his body had never quite forgiven him for. He looked down at the boy, then crouched, lowering himself until their eyes were level. The crouching cost him something. He did not care. "Josiah, tell me exactly what you saw. Take your time." The boy took a breath. He held the zipper pull of his jacket with 2 fingers and earned it slowly, the way some children fidget when they are thinking carefully. "He came in at maybe 11 o'clock. I know because the church on Rideau rings the bells, and I count them. He had a flashlight, a small one, the kind that clips on your shirt. He went right to your car. He didn't look at any other car. He had a bag, a black bag, like a gym bag. He put the bag down and then he laid on his back and slid under the car the way my uncle used to slide under trucks when he worked at the shop in Pikwakanagan. He was under there for maybe 10 minutes. I heard metal sounds, tapping, and then a sound like a drill but quieter. When he came out, the bag was lighter. He put it over his shoulder and it didn't pull the same way. He stood up. He looked at the car for a minute. Then he made a phone call. "A phone call," Edmund said. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. He placed them on his knees to give them something to do. "Yes, sir," he said, "tomorrow after court." He said Prescott comes out the side door and takes the elevator to level 1, same as always. He said the steering will go on the down ramp at Metcalf. He said at that speed it'll look like the old man lost control. He said those words. The old man. Then he laughed. Then he said the money. He said half was already in the account, and the other half when it's done and it looks clean. Edmund felt the garage shift slightly, the way the world shifts when a piece of it that had been solid turns out to be paper. He put one hand on the cold concrete floor to steady himself. "Did he say a name?" Edmund said quietly. The person he was talking to on the phone. Did he call them anything? Josiah thought. He held the zipper pulled tighter. He said boss. He said that twice, and one time he said a name. He said it fast. It sounded like Derek. Or Derek. Something like that. He said it like he knew the person. Like they were friends, but the phone man was the smaller friend. Edmund closed his eyes. He kept them closed for 3 full seconds. In those 3 seconds, he saw Derek Fanning's face at the firm's 30th anniversary dinner, raising a glass of Veuve Clicquot and calling Edmund the finest mentor a young lawyer could ask for. He saw Derek at Miriam's funeral, standing in the second pew at Christ Church Cathedral with his hand on Edmund's shoulder, saying, "Take all the time you need, Ed. We'll hold the fort." He saw Derek's signature on the document that Edmund had found 6 weeks ago in a drawer that should have been empty, the document that had brought him to this courthouse yesterday to give a deposition about a pattern of fraudulent billings, stretching back 7 years, billings that bore Derek Fanning's initials and Edmund Prescott's forged signature, and that had siphoned approximately $9 million from the firm's trust accounts into a numbered company registered in the Cayman Islands. Derek, who had known about the deposition, who had known about the parking garage, who had known about the ramp at Metcalf Street, the sharp downhill turn where Edmund always shifted into second gear because the grade was steep and the merge onto Queen Elizabeth driveway was blind. Edmund opened his eyes. "Josiah," he said, "you are going to come with me now. We are going to walk up the stairs to the lobby. We are not going to touch this car. We are not going to come back to this level. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. Do you trust me?" The boy looked at him. It was not the look of a child who trusts easily. It was the look of a child who has learned to read faces the way other children learn to read books. Out of necessity, because getting it wrong has consequences. "My grandmother says you can trust a person whose eyes don't move when they talk to you," Josiah said. "Your eyes don't move." Edmund held out his hand. Josiah took it. His fingers were cold. The sleeve of the puffer jacket came down over his wrist and covered the place where their hands met. They walked to the stairwell together. Edmund did not walk fast. He matched the boy's pace, which was short and deliberate, the pace of a child who has learned to walk carefully in boots that are too big. In the lobby, Edmund found a bench near the security desk and sat Josiah on it. He told the boy to wait. He told the guard at the desk that the boy was with him and was not to be moved. Then he walked 6 steps to the window overlooking Elgin Street and called the Ottawa Police Service. He did not call Derek. He did not call the firm. He did not call his own son in Vancouver, who would have panicked and booked a flight. He called the police. "This is Edmund Prescott. I'm at the Elgin Street Courthouse. I have reason to believe my vehicle has been mechanically sabotaged. It's a blue Volvo S90, plate EDPR low, parked on level 1 of the underground garage. I was told by a witness that a man accessed the vehicle last night and worked on it for approximately 10 minutes. I need an officer and I need someone who knows cars. Now, please." He hung up. He walked back to the bench. Josiah was sitting exactly where Edmund had left him, his hands folded in his lap, his rubber boots not reaching the floor. He was looking at the marble pattern on the lobby floor with the quiet concentration of a child who is used to waiting. "Are you hungry?" Edmund said. Josiah's face did something complicated. It was the face of a child deciding whether admitting hunger was safe. "I had a granola bar this morning," he said, "from the bin at the shelter." That was not an answer, and they both knew it. The security guard, a woman named Constable Baudouin, who had worked the courthouse for 11 years and had seen Edmund Prescott walk through this lobby 1,000 times, brought Josiah a sandwich from the staff kitchen without being asked, ham and Swiss on brown bread cut in triangles. She set it on the bench beside him with a small carton of apple juice and a napkin. Josiah looked at Edmund. "Go ahead," Edmund said. Josiah ate the way Edmund had seen people eat who were not sure when the next meal was coming, carefully, without waste. He folded the napkin after each bite and set it back on his knee. The first officers arrived in 9 minutes. A detective named Sergeant Villemaire, stocky, mid-40s, with the unhurried manner of a man who had spent 2 decades hearing things that would have made other people hurry, came up the stairs from the parking garage after 20 minutes with a mechanic from the OPS Forensic Vehicle Unit. He found Edmund on the bench beside Josiah. "Mr. Prescott," he said. The detective's face was controlled, but his voice had a note in it that Edmund recognized from decades of courtrooms. It was the note a person's voice takes on when the facts have turned out to be worse than expected. "Tell me," Edmund said. "Your brake lines have been severed, both the primary and the secondary. The cuts are clean, professional. They used a tool designed for the job. The fluid has been drained and the reservoir wiped so you wouldn't see a puddle. But that's not all. The steering column linkage has been loosened at 3 points. The car would have responded normally for the first 2 or 3 turns. After that, at any speed above 30 kilometers an hour, the wheel would have disconnected from the front axle. On a straight road, you'd have drifted. On a hill, on a ramp, on a curve, you would have had no steering and no brakes at the same time. The mechanic estimates the work took 8 to 12 minutes. It was done by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Edmund said nothing for a long time. Josiah, sitting beside him, had stopped eating. He was holding the last triangle of sandwich in both hands and watching Edmund's face the way he had watched it in the parking garage, with that same grave attention, as though he understood that what was happening now was the kind of thing that reshapes the rest of a person's life. The boy saw the man who did it, Edmund said. He can describe him. He heard a phone conversation. He heard a name. Sergeant Villemere looked at Josiah. He crouched. He had the same instinct Officer Reyes had in the other story, the instinct good police officers develop, which is to make themselves small in front of a child who has already been asked to be too big. Hey, buddy. I'm Sergeant Villemere. I'm with the Ottawa Police. You can call me Mark if you want. Is it okay if I ask you some things? Yes, sir. You've been very brave today. I want you to know that. I wasn't brave. I was scared. But my grandmother says scared and brave are the same thing if you do the right thing anyway. Mark Villemere's pen paused on his notebook. He did not look up. He wrote the sentence down, slowly, the way a person writes something they intend to keep. Josiah told him everything. He told him about the church bells at 11. He told him about the man's flashlight clipped to his shirt pocket. He told him the man was white, average height, wearing dark coveralls with no logo and work boots with a yellow toe cap, the kind you see at construction sites. He told him the man had a scar on his left forearm, long and pale, like a burn that had healed badly. He told him about the phone call, the words tomorrow after court, the words the steering will go on the down ramp, the words the old man, the name Derek, the money arrangement, half and half. He told him one more thing. When the man was leaving, he walked past the vent where I sleep. He didn't see me, but I saw his face close. He had a mole here. Josiah touched the right side of his own jaw, just below the ear, dark brown, about the size of a lentil. Sergeant Villemere wrote it down. He stood slowly. Mr. Prescott, he said, I need a word, private. They stepped to the far end of the lobby. Josiah stayed on the bench. Constable Baudouin had brought him a second apple juice without being asked. The name Derek, Villemere said. That means something to you. It was not a question. Derek Fanning, Edmund said. He was my junior partner for 19 years. I made him a named partner 12 years ago. He is the reason I am in this building. I gave a deposition yesterday in a fraud investigation involving the firm's trust accounts. Derek is the subject of that investigation. He knew I was deposing. He knew I park on level 1. He knew my route home. Edmund paused. He was at my wife's funeral, he said. He was at my wife's funeral and he brought flowers. Villemere nodded. It was a slow nod, the nod of a man who has seen this particular kind of betrayal before and has never found a way to make it weigh less. Mr. Prescott, we're going to move on this today. I need you to not contact Fanning. Not call, not text, not email. I need you to assume your phone may be compromised. We'll provide a secure line. Is there anyone you trust completely who has no connection to the firm? My daughter-in-law, Edmund said. Kathleen Prescott. She's a family physician in Canada. She has no connection to the legal world. She's the most sensible person I know. Call her from our phone. Tell her what you need. Don't tell her everything yet. That can wait until we have Fanning in custody. Edmund called Kathleen from the sergeant's phone. She answered on the first ring the way she always did, because Kathleen was the kind of person who answered phones the way she answered examination room doors. Immediately, without fuss, ready for whatever was on the other side. Dad, she said, because she had called him Dad since the day she married his son. What's wrong? I need you to come to the Elgin Street Courthouse. Bring the car, not the clinic van. Come alone. There's a situation and I need someone I trust. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She was there in 17. Hat. Kathleen Prescott came through the courthouse lobby doors in her clinic scrubs with a fleece thrown over the top and her reading glasses still pushed up on her forehead, the way they always were because she forgot about them the moment she stopped reading. She was 38, practical in the way that family doctors in small Canadian cities are practical, which is to say she did not ask unnecessary questions, and she carried granola bars in her jacket pockets the way other people carry business cards. She saw Josiah before she saw Edmund. Her face did something that Edmund recognized, the particular rearrangement of a medical professional's features when they see a child who is not being fed enough. She walked to the bench. She crouched in front of the boy the way everyone had been crouching in front of this boy all afternoon, because something about Josiah's stillness made adults lower themselves without thinking about it. Hi there, she said. I'm Kathleen. I'm a doctor. Are you hurt anywhere? No, ma'am. Are you cold? A little. She took off her fleece and put it around his shoulders. It was enormous on him. He pulled it closed across his chest with both hands and looked up at her with an expression that was part surprise and part the careful blankness of a child who has learned not to get attached to borrowed warmth. Edmund told Kathleen what had happened. He used short sentences. Kathleen listened the way she listened to patients, which is to say completely, with her whole body, without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 10 seconds. "The boy," she said. "Josiah, where does he live?" "At the shelter on Murray Street," Edmund said. "With his grandmother. She's his only family. His mother died 4 years ago. He didn't say how, and I didn't ask. And the grandmother? She's not well. He told me she coughs at night. He told me the staff at the shelter have been giving her medicine, but she won't go to the hospital because she's afraid they'll take him." Kathleen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were bright. "Right," she said. "Right. Okay. Here's what we're going to do." Kathleen Prescott did what Kathleen Prescott always did when a situation required action and no one else was moving. She moved. She called the shelter on Murray Street from Villemaire's phone and spoke to the director, a woman named Mrs. Ozzie, and explained in calm, clear language that Josiah was safe, that he was at the courthouse with Edmund Prescott, that they would be bringing him back within the hour, and that she, Kathleen, was a licensed physician who would like to see Josiah's grandmother if the grandmother was willing. Mrs. Ozzie said the grandmother's name was Ruth O'Callagh. She said Ruth had been at the shelter for 2 months. She said Ruth had worked as a teaching assistant on the Algonquin Reserve at Pequawkanagan for 26 years before her daughter died, and she took Josiah. She said Ruth had a cough that had become something more than a cough about 3 weeks ago, and that the shelter's visiting nurse had said the word bronchitis, but that Mrs. Ozzie suspected it was worse. She said Ruth would not go to the hospital. She said Ruth would rather die in the shelter than let the system separate her from that boy. Mrs. Ozzie said one more thing. "Mr. Prescott," she said. Because Kathleen had put the phone on speaker, "You need to understand who you're dealing with. Ruth O'Callagh is not a woman who accepts charity. She raised her daughter alone. She buried her daughter alone. She has been raising this boy alone. She has been sleeping on a cot in a room with 11 other women for 2 months, and she has not once, not one time, asked for anything except a library card for the boy. If you walk into that shelter like a man who's come to save her, she will look through you like glass." "I understand," Edmund said. "No," Mrs. Ozzie said gently. "You probably don't, but you will." They arrived at the Murray Street shelter at 5:45. The shelter was a converted church hall, 3 stories of old brick with tall windows that let in the late afternoon light in long, pale columns. The front entrance had a wheelchair ramp and a hand-painted sign that said, "All are welcome" in English and in Algonquin. There were flower boxes in the ground floor windows. Someone had planted marigolds. They were still blooming somehow in mid-October, because marigolds are stubborn and do not read calendars. Kathleen parked across the street. Edmund got out first. Josiah got out of the back seat wearing Kathleen's fleece, which hung past his knees. He had not taken it off. He had, at some point during the drive, zipped his own deflated puffer jacket over top of it, creating a layered arrangement that made him look like a small, serious astronaut. "That's the window," Josiah said, pointing. "Second floor, 3rd from the left. That's where grandmother sleeps. She likes that spot, because in the morning the light comes in and she can see the canal from there if she stands up." They went inside. Mrs. Ozzie met them in the front hallway. She was a small woman with short gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, and the composed, unhurried bearing of a person who has been managing crises for so long that she has stopped recognizing them as crises and started recognizing them as Tuesday. She looked at Josiah first. "Josiah O'Callagh," she said, "you were supposed to be back at 4:30. I know, Mrs. Ozzie. I'm sorry, I had to help someone." Mrs. Ozzie looked at Edmund. She looked at Kathleen. She looked back at Josiah. "You always do, baby," she said softly. "You always do. Come on upstairs. Your grandmother's been reading that same page for an hour waiting on you." They climbed the stairs. The women's section was on the 2nd floor, a long room that had once been the church's fellowship hall. The ceiling was high. The floors were hardwood, scuffed and old and clean. There were 12 cots arranged in 2 rows along the walls, each with a thin curtain that could be drawn for privacy. Most of the curtains were open. Most of the cots were empty at this hour. The cot near the 3rd window was occupied. Ruth O'Callagh was sitting up against 2 pillows, reading a paperback with a cracked spine. She was small, smaller than Edmund had expected, with a face that was lined and sharp and beautiful in the way that faces become beautiful when they have spent decades being used for their intended purpose, which is to express things honestly. Her hair was black and gray, pulled back in a single braid that lay over her shoulder. She wore a plaid flannel shirt buttoned to the collar and a gray wool blanket over her legs. There was a glass of water on the floor beside the cot. There was a drawing, done in crayon, taped to the wall above the pillow. It showed two stick figures holding hands, one large and one small, standing in front of a house with a red door. The house had a chimney. Smoke was coming out of the chimney in a careful spiral. Ruth saw Josiah and her whole body changed, not just her face. Her shoulders dropped, her hands opened. The book fell closed in her lap without her marking the page, because this child was more important than any page. "Boy," she said, "where have you been?" Josiah crossed the room in 4 steps and pressed his face into her shoulder. She held him with both arms. She held him the way a person holds something that is the only reason they are still participating in the world. Over Josiah's head, Ruth's eyes found Edmund. They were dark, steady, and entirely without deference. She looked at him the way she might look at weather, something that had arrived, something she would deal with. "You'd be the one," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Sit down, then." There was no chair. Edmund found a wooden stool near the wall that had a stack of towels on it. He set the towels on the floor and sat. The stool was low. He had to look up to meet Ruth's eyes. He did not mind that. In fact, something in him recognized that it was correct. Ruth looked at Kathleen, who had stopped near the doorway, giving space. "And you? I'm Kathleen. I'm a family doctor." "I didn't ask for a doctor." "No, ma'am. You didn't." Ruth turned back to Edmund. Josiah had pulled back from her shoulder but had not let go of her hand. He was sitting on the edge of the cot with his rubber boots dangling. "Tell me what happened," Ruth said. Edmund told her. He used short sentences because he sensed she was a woman who valued economy. He told her about the parking garage, the severed brake lines, the loosened steering. The phone call Josiah had overheard. The name Derek, the police. He did not mention the dollar amount of the fraud because that number had no meaning in this room. He did not mention his own career or his reputation because those things also had no meaning in this room. When he finished, Ruth was quiet for a full minute. Her thumb moved slowly across the back of Josiah's hand. "Josiah," she said, "baby, you went into that garage again after I told you not to. I only sleep there when it's full here, grandmother. The vents are warm. I don't bother anyone." Ruth closed her eyes. She did not cry. Edmund understood with a sudden quiet certainty that she had not cried in front of this child in a very long time. Perhaps years. Perhaps since the day she buried her daughter and picked up her grandson's hand and started walking. She opened her eyes. "Mr. Prescott," she said, "I am going to ask you a question and I want an honest answer, not a kind answer." "Yes, ma'am. If my grandson had not stopped you this morning, would you be alive right now?" "No, ma'am. The sergeant told me I would have lost steering and brakes on the ramp at Metcalf. At that grade, at any speed, there was no surviving it." Ruth nodded once. "Then you owe us a debt," she said, "and I want to be clear about something before you start trying to pay it. I have been a teaching assistant for 26 years. I have raised one daughter and buried her. I have raised this boy from the age of 2. I have lived in this city for 8 months and in this shelter for 2 of them, and I have not once, not one time, asked anyone for anything I could do for myself. I am telling you this not because I want your pity. I am telling you because I need you to understand that whatever you offer me, I will say no to if it smells like rescuzo. I am not a project. This boy is not a photo opportunity. We are people. Are we clear? We are clear. Then say what you came to say." Edmund looked at this woman on her cot in a converted church hall with a crayon drawing above her pillow and a glass of water on the floor and a grandson who had saved his life by sleeping behind a heating vent and remembering the sound of church bells. And he said the truest thing he had said all day. "I owe you a debt I cannot repay, and I am asking you to let me try. Not as charity. As a debt. You need a hospital. Kathleen has spoken to a colleague at the Ottawa hospital. There is a room available tonight. It is quiet. It has a window. There is a cot beside the bed for Josiah. He will not leave your sight. Kathleen will be his guardian on paper for the duration of your stay, so that no one from Children's Aid has grounds to intervene. My lawyer, not from my firm, an independent attorney, will file temporary guardianship papers tomorrow morning to protect your custody. No one is taking this boy from you, not while I have breath." He paused, and when you are well, he said, "There is a house. It is small. It is on a quiet street in Vanier, near the river. It belonged to my wife. She bought it 30 years ago as a rental property, and then she could never bring herself to rent it because she said it was too personal and too full of light to give to strangers. It has been empty since she died. It has a kitchen with a window over the sink. It has a yard. There is a school 4 blocks away. I am not giving it to you. I am transferring the deed into your name. Because it is yours, because my wife would have wanted it to be yours, and because a woman who raised a boy who saves the lives of strangers deserves to live in a house with a window over the sink. The paperwork will be in your name. There are no conditions." Ruth Okalik looked at him for a long time. She looked at Josiah. She looked at the crayon drawing on the wall, the house with the red door, the chimney, the 2 figures holding hands. "Mr. Prescott," she said, "does this house have a red door?" "No, ma'am, it's white." She was quiet for a moment. "We'll paint it," she said. Edmund's vision blurred. He removed his glasses and cleaned them with the hem of his shirt because that was the only way he could think of to manage what was happening on his face. "I have conditions of my own," Ruth said. He nodded. He put his glasses back on. "You do not put this boy on television. You do not put him in a newspaper. You do not bring him to a gala. You do not tell people he saved your life at dinner parties. He is 6 years old. He is going to go to that school 4 blocks away. He is going to skin his knees and lose his mittens and forget his spelling homework and be ordinary. That is what I want for him. Ordinary, not heroic. Ordinary. If you want to be part of his life, you will be the man who comes for tea on Sunday afternoons and brings a picams and does not make a fuss and brings a book sometimes and does not make a fuss. You will help with school fees when the time comes because I am proud, but I am not stupid, and a teaching assistant's pension does not cover everything. You will not buy him things to make yourself feel better. If he needs a winter coat, I will tell you. If he does not need a winter coat, you will not buy one anyway. And if we disagree about what is best for him, I win. Not because I am always right, because I am his grandmother and you are not. You win, Edmund said. Then we have an understanding. They had an understanding. The ambulance Kathleen had arranged was not an ambulance. It was a patient transport van, white and quiet, and the paramedic who came up the stairs spoke to Ruth as Mrs. O'Callaghan asked permission before touching her arm to check her pulse. They brought a wheelchair. Ruth looked at it the way a person looks at an insult that is also practical. "I can walk," she said. "You can," Kathleen said. "But your lungs are working harder than they should be, and stairs are not their friend right now." Ruth considered this. "Fine," she said, "but the boy pushes me." Josiah pushed the wheelchair down the hall to the elevator with the seriousness of a child performing the most important task of his life. Mrs. Osei stood in the hallway and watched them go. She pressed 2 fingers to her lips and then to the doorframe, a small gesture that no one was meant to see. Edmund saw it. At the hospital, the room was what Kathleen had promised. Warm, clean, a window facing the canal, a recliner in the corner that folded into a small bed, 2 extra blankets, a lamp that gave soft light. Ruth sat on the bed and looked out the window. The canal was dark. The autumn trees along the bank were gold and red and thinning. A jogger passed on the path, a small moving figure in the early evening. Josiah climbed into the recliner and pulled Kathleen's fleece over himself like a blanket. He had not taken it off since she gave it to him. Edmund suspected he would not take it off for a long time. Kathleen spoke to the attending physician in the hallway. When she came back, her face was the face she used when she was translating medical language into human language. "Pneumonia," she said to Edmund. "Both lungs. Significant but treatable. Antibiotics tonight. She'll respond. She's strong. The doctor says 2 weeks, maybe less." Edmund leaned against the hallway wall. He had not eaten since a piece of toast that morning, but he did not feel hunger. He felt something else, something else, something that did not have a name, that lived in the space between exhaustion and gratitude, and the particular vertigo of a man who has just learned that his life was saved by a 6-year-old who sleeps behind heating vents and counts church bells to tell the time. Through the open door, he could see Ruth's hand resting on top of the white blanket. Josiah had reached across from the recliner and placed his small hand on top of hers. They were both falling asleep. Ruth from medication. Josiah from the simple fact that a child who has spent an afternoon carrying the weight of a grown man's survival eventually runs out of fuel. Edmund watched them for a long time. He did not go in. He did not want to disturb the quiet. He thought about the parking garage, the key in the ignition. The half-second in which he had almost turned it and pulled out onto Elgin Street and driven down the ramp at Metcalf, where his steering would have come apart in his hands and his brakes would have done nothing, and his car would have gone through the guardrail and into the oncoming lane, and that would have been the end of Edmund Prescott, retired partner, widower. A man whose greatest regret, he realized now, was not the things he had done wrong, but the things he had not done at all. He thought about a night 4 months ago in June, when he had been walking home along the canal path after a concert at the Knack, and it had started to rain suddenly, the way it does in Ottawa in June, without warning, and he had passed a woman sitting on a bench near the Pretoria Bridge with a boy asleep in her lap. The woman had no umbrella. She had pulled the boy's jacket up over his head to keep him dry, and she was sitting in the rain herself, her shoulders hunched, her hair plastered flat against her neck. Edmund had stopped. He had taken off his raincoat, the good one, the Burberry his wife had given him, and he had draped it over the woman's shoulders without saying a word. She had looked up at him. She had said, "Thank you." He had said, "It's just a coat." He had walked home in the rain. He had not thought about it again until this moment. Josiah remembered Ruth had said to him downstairs in the shelter while Kathleen arranged the transport. She had said it quietly, the way a person says something that matters more than everything else they have said that day. He came home that night in June and told me about a tall man with white hair and glasses who gave us his coat by the bridge in the rain, he said. The man had kind eyes. He said the man's coat smelled like wood and lemons. He remembered you, Mr. Prescott. He remembered your face well enough to recognize you in that parking garage 4 months later. He recognized you, and because he recognized you, he trusted you enough to warn you. You did not give that coat to save yourself. You gave it because it was raining and a woman was on a bench. But the small things you do without thinking, those are the things that come back. Those are the only things that come back. Edmund stood in the hospital hallway and looked at the two of them sleeping in the warm light of the room. He stood there for a long time. He thought about coats and rain and heating vents and church bells and the specific weight of a 6-year-old's hand in his own. Then he went to find something to eat because he was alive and it was evening and tomorrow there would be things to do. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and tell us in the comments where you are listening from. Subscribe to Honest Silent Stories for more stories about the small, quiet things that change everything and the unlikely people who see what the rest of us walk past.